So this is the project in which we will be working today on today's tutorial. This is a Python application which uses Dreambooth in order to train a model with your own images. Now let me show you how it works. I already trained a model with my images, and this is how I would look like as an elf, which are some very amazing results. Now let me show you something else. If I go here to select style, you can see I have a very long list of many different styles I can try with this model. So I'm going to select Viking, click on generate, and this is how I will look like as a Viking. Now let me show you some additional examples. If I select clown and I click on generate, this is how I will look like as a clown, and these are some very good results. And if I select Jedi, this is how I will look like as a Jedi. So this is exactly a project in which we will be working today on today's tutorial, and I'm going to show you the entire process of how to set up this project up and running. Let me give you a very high level idea of how this project works. This is a super simplified pipeline of the entire process. So we will be setting up a Python application which will be running on our local environment, and we will be using a server in RunPod in order to train new models and in order to make new inferences. Now the thing is, we will not be communicating with RunPod directly, no, but we will be using an S3 bucket and an SQS queue. So every time we want to make a new training, or every time we want to make a new inference, we will be uploading data to this S3 bucket, and we will be updating this SQS queue. Then the server will be pulling data from the queue continuously, and then it's going to trigger either a new training process or a new inference, and then it's going to upload all the results back to the S3 bucket, and then we are just going to download the results from this S3 bucket. So this is very important. This is pretty much the idea, the high level idea of the process of the project in which we will be working today. And now let me show you something else. Let me go to the GitHub repository of today's tutorial, and let me show you a couple of files which are main.py and executepipeline.py. Main.py is the file we will be using in order to execute the Python application, and executepipeline.py is the script we will be running in the server in RunPod. So I invite you to take a very close look at each one of these files. You will see they are very straightforward, but nevertheless, please take a very close look at each one of them. And if you have any question regarding these files, please write it down in the comments below. Now let's continue, and I'm going to show you how to set up this Python application up and running. So this is the GitHub repository of today's tutorial, and if I scroll down, you can see we have a very comprehensive README file with all the instructions, with all the steps we will need to take in order to set up this project up and running. And in this video, I'm going to execute every single one of these steps one at a time, so you can follow along the entire process. And you can see we have three sections. The first one involves AWS. We will need to go to AWS, and we will need to create some products and services, and then we will have another section which involves RunPod. So we will need to execute many steps in RunPod, and then the last section is the Python application, and this is where we are going to complete the entire process. This is where we are going to complete setting up this project up and running. So let's get started with this tutorial. Let's go to the first step, which is going to AWS. So once you go to AWS and once you log in to your account, you are going to see something like this, which is your AWS management console. Now let's get back to the repository, to the README file, and let's go to the second step, which is go to S3 and create an S3 bucket. So I am going to S3, and I am going to create a bucket. I'm going to name this bucket something like Dreambooth Stable Diffusion tutorial bucket. And that's pretty much all. Now I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to create buckets. And that's pretty much all. So the bucket has been created. This is the bucket we have just created. And now let's go back to the README file and let's continue with this process. Now we need to go to SQS, and we will need to create a first in, first out type of queue. So let's go to SQS. So I'm going to type SQS. I'm going to open this service in a new tab. And now I'm going to create queue. I'm going to select this option, which is first in, first out, and the name of this queue will be something like image generation Dreambooth queue. And we need to append .fifo because this is a first in, first out type of queue. And now I'm going to scroll all the way down and I'm going to create queue. Okay, so the queue has been created, and now let's see what's the next step in this process. Now we need to go to the queue we have just created, to the settings, and then we need to select the option content-based deduplication. So let's get here, I'm going to click on edit, and then I'm going to click here on content-based deduplication. Then I'm going to scroll all the way down and I'm going to click on save. And that's pretty much all. Now let's get back here. That's done. We have already created the S3 bucket and the SQS queue. Now we need to create an AAM user, and we need to attach this policy, which is S3 SQS access.json, which is this policy we have over here. But let's take it one step at a time. Let's go to AAM. I'm going to users, add users. This will be something like image generation Dreambooth tutorial user. Okay. Next, attach policies directly. And this is where we're going to create policy. We are going to select this option, which is JSON. And then we will copy and paste the content of this file we have in the GitHub repository, right? Remember, we need to attach this policy S3 SQS access.json, and this policy, this file, is in the GitHub repository. So this is the file, this is how it looks like, and now I'm going to copy and paste the content of this file over here. And you can see we have these two placeholders. One of them is S3 bucket, and then the other one is SQS ARN. So what we need to do now is go into the S3 bucket we have created. I'm going to copy the S3 bucket name, and I'm going to paste the name here and also here. Okay, now I'm going to the SQS queue I have created, and I'm going to copy the ARN value, which is this one. I'm going back here to the policy, and I'm going to paste the ARN value over here. And that's pretty much all. Now I'm going to click on next. The policy name will be something like image generation policy, something like S3 SQS policy. Okay. If I scroll down and I create policy, that's going to be pretty much all. So the policy has been created. Okay, now let's continue creating this user, and now I'm going to click here on refresh, and I'm going to search for the policy we have just created, which is this one, image generation S3 SQS policy. I'm going to click on next and then create user. And that's pretty much all. If I click on this user we have created, so this is the policy we have just attached, and basically we have provided this user with two very specific permissions. So this user will be able to access this S3 bucket, and they will also be able to access this SQS queue, and that's it. Those are the only permissions we have provided to this user. Now let's get back to the README file. Let's see what's the next step in this process. And now we need to create access keys for the user. So let's go back here to the user we have created. Let's go to security credentials, and let's scroll down until this section over here, which is access keys. And let's create access keys. I'm going to select this option, which is local code. I'm going to select here and then next. Create access key, and that's pretty much all. So I'm just going to keep this tab open over here. We are going to get back here later on. And now let's get back to the README file and let's see how we can continue with this process. So this means that the first part in this process is now completed, is now ready. Everything that involves AWS is now ready, and we can just continue. All the products and all the services we need to create in AWS, it's ready. Now let's move to the next section, which involves RunPod. The first step in this process is going to RunPod. So I'm just going to click this link over here. I'm going to click this link and I'm going to open this in a new tab. And please mind that this is an affiliate link, so if you sign up using this link, I may make a commission. Now let's continue. If you don't have an account in RunPod, this is the time for you to create a new account to sign up in RunPod. And if you already have an account, so now you need to log into your account. So I'm just going to click in login. And this is how the RunPod dashboard looks like. Now let's go back to the README file and let's see what we need to do now. Now let's go to Secure Cloud and launch an RTX A6000 pod. So I'm going to Secure Cloud and I'm going to launch an RTX A6000 pod. I'm going to click on Deploy and we will need to select the template RunPod Stable Diffusion. So let's do one step at a time. I'm going to search for the template RunPod Stable Diffusion and we will need to unselect Start Jupyter Notebook because we don't really need to start a Jupyter Notebook. And now that's pretty much all. I'm just going to leave everything else in the default values. I'm going to click on Continue. Now let's click on Deploy. And this is going to take a few seconds, and now and once everything is completed, you are going to see your new path over here, right? You can see I have a few paths already while I was creating this tutorial and while I was preparing our projects, but this is the path we have just created, right? You can see everything it's starting and this is going to take a few seconds. Okay, now the pod has been created, and now let's go back to the README file and let's see what's the next step in this process. Now we will need to SSH into the pod we have created. So let's get back here and I'm going to click on Connect. And basically there are two different ways in which you can SSH into this pod. You can either copy and paste this command over here, which is an SSH command, which you can run in your terminal, or you can start a web terminal. Let me show you how it looks like. So I'm going to click on Start Web Terminal and then I'm going to connect to Web Terminal. This is going to open a new tab and this is basically the web terminal we have just created, and it's basically the same. You can either open a web terminal or you can just SSH as you usually do from a terminal. It's exactly the same. In my case, I'm going to open a terminal and I'm just going to SSH using that command. And also, if you decide to SSH like this, you will need to create a public key. So you will need to go to configure public key and you will need to follow the instructions which are provided over here in order to create your public key. In my case, I have already created my public key, so I'm just going to continue. I'm going to stop the web terminal too because I'm not going to use it. And now let's go back to the terminal and I'm going to execute this command. Okay, now I am logged in and now let's see what happens next. Now we will need to execute these commands, so let's start executing all of these commands. The first one is cloning the repository, the Dreambooth repository we will be using in this tutorial. And let me show you how this repository looks like. We will be using this repository, which is Dreambooth Stable Diffusion from Joe Pena, and this is how this repository looks like. So the only thing I'm going to do is to clone this repository and we are going to continue from there. So let's go back to the README file and I'm going to execute this command in the pod we created. So let's go back here and I'm going to git clone this repository. Okay, now let's continue. So I am just going to continue with this process. I'm going to execute all of these commands one at a time and then I'm going to resume the recording. Okay, and that's pretty much all. So the only thing I did was executing each one of these commands into this terminal, into this session over here, and that was pretty much all. It was a very straightforward process. And now let's continue. Now the next step is downloading these 4 files we have over here, and these are files we have in this GitHub repository over here. So I'm just going to open each one of these files and I'm going to download these files into this terminal. There are many ways in which we could do it, but the way I'm going to do it is perhaps the most simple one, which is just, I'm going to open these files first, and then I'm just going to copy and paste the content of these files into some new files I'm going to create here. So this one is credentials.py. And we need to install nano as well, so apt install nano. Okay, now let's do it again, nano credentials.py. I'm going to copy and then paste, and then that's it. Now let's do the same with all the other files. Nano variables.py. Let's continue, then it comes execute pipeline.py. Nano execute pipeline.py. Okay, now let's continue with this process. Now we need to copy and paste this file over here, which is prompts.py, and that's it. Okay, so we have completed this step over here, which is downloading these 4 files. And now the next step in this process is going to credentials.py and update these files with the access keys we created in one of our previous steps, right? So we will get back here to these access keys, and the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one, and then I'm going to edit this file. So I am going to paste the value over here. Then I'm going to do the same with the secret access key. And that's pretty much all. So I'm going to save changes and I'm going to exit the file. Now let's get back to the readme file, and then we will need to go to variables.py and update this file with the names of the S3 bucket and the SQS we have created, right? So I'm going to open variables.py, and you can see we have these 2 placeholders. We have these 2 variables which are initialized as none, and what we will need to do now is go into the S3 bucket we have created. I'm going to copy and paste the name over here. Okay, I think I made a mistake. Okay, over there. Okay, and then I'm going to the SQS we created, and I'm going to copy the ARN value, and I'm going to paste it over here. Okay, and that's pretty much all. I'm going to quit the file and I'm going to save changes. Okay, and now let's get back here, and now the next step is executing the file, execute pipeline.py. So I'm just going to copy and paste this command, which is going to execute one of the files we have just created. So something is going on. We need to get back to variables, nano variables.py, because we made a very small mistake, which is this is not the queue IRN, but this is the queue URL. So I'm just going to delete all this value and I'm going to copy the URL, right? A few minutes ago we copied the ARN and we don't need to copy the ARN, we need to copy the URL. So I'm going to copy the URL and I'm going to paste it here. And let's see now, I'm going to execute the same file again. And now everything seems to be working just fine. And now let's continue. Okay, so we have executed everything step regarding RunPod. We have created the pod and we have just made everything we need to do in order to set up this process. And now we will need to continue with the Python application. Now let's continue with this process. The next step is cloning this repository. But before we do so, let's go to PyCharm, because now it's time to start working locally on this application, right? So this is my PyCharm and I'm going to File, New Project, and I'm going to select the directory in which I am going to create this project, which is this one, and then tutorial. Okay, I'm going to click OK and I'm just going to leave all the default values. I'm going to create a virtual environment with Python 3.8. I'm going to click on create this window, no, new window, that's better. And that's pretty much all. Okay, so we have created a new Python project, and now I'm going to git clone this repository in my local environment. So I'm going to copy the repository URL, and I'm going to get back to PyCharm, and I'm just going to the terminal, and I'm going to type something like git clone and the repository URL. Okay, so the repository has been cloned. This is the repository we have just cloned, and now let's continue. Now we will need to install the requirements. So the easiest way to install the requirements is going to a terminal, and we are just going to type something like pp install -r, and then the requirements are located here and then here. Okay. Now let's see what's the next step. Now we will need to go to credentials.py, and we will need to update this file with the access key credentials we created in one of our previous steps, exactly the same way as we did in the pod we created, right? So now let's get back to the AAM role we created again, and I'm just going to copy the access key first. I'm going to credentials, and I'm going to paste the value over here. And now I'm going to copy the secret access key. And that's pretty much all. So now let's continue. Now the next step is going to variables.py, and we need to update this file with the S3 bucket we created and the URL to the SQS queue, exactly as we did in the pod we created a few minutes ago. So I'm going to variables.py, and I'm going to copy and paste this value. And then I'm going to copy and paste the SQS queue URL. And that's pretty much all. And now let's see what's the next step in this process. And now we need to execute main.py. So let's get back to PyCharm, and now let's go to main.py, and I'm just going to click on execute. So let's see what happens. Okay, I see I have a very small typo over here. Basically it's from variables import everything, and then we have another line which is from prompts import default prompts. If I go back to the GitHub repository, let me fix this issue right away, so it's fixed by the time you work on this project. Something like this, commit, update, and that's pretty much all. Okay, let's go back to PyCharm, and now let's try to execute this file again. And now everything seems to be working just fine, and you can see that this is a very simple user interface. We have these options over here, which is select model, select style, and then prompt, and then generate, right? Let me show you how it works. So if I'm going to select model, it's completely empty because we have just started this application, so we have not trained any model so far. So I'm going to train a new model, and let me show you how we are going to train a new model. You can see we have some instructions over here on how you need to select your data, how you need to prepare the data you are going to use in order to train this model. You can see it says you need to choose at least 20 images, and this is the proportion in which you will need to select these images: 2 or 3 full body, 3/5 upper body, and 5/12 close up on face, right? So you need to have many images of your face, like a close up of your face, and then a few images of your upper body, and then fewer images of your full body. Once you have all these images, you will need to zip them all up into a zip file. But let me show you an example. Let me show you the images I used to train a model with my face, right? With my images. So basically you can see that these are a lot of images. I'm going to make this larger. You can see that these are a lot of images, and you have a few full body, then you have many close-ups, and you have a lot of diversity, right? This is a very diverse data set, right? In total I'm using 28 images, and you can see there is a little of everything, and it's a very diverse background and so on. And once you have all these images, you need to put all the images into a zip file like this, right? So this is the zip file I have created with all the images I just showed you. Now let's continue. Now I am going to show you how to train a model. The first thing you need to do is to select file. You need to select the file, the zip file you have created. In my case, this zip file is located over here, right? Training images dreambooth.zip. And then this parameter, which is steps per image, and this is basically how many steps are you going to train this model. This is how many steps per image. So in my case, I have 28 images and I'm going to select this value in 170. So this means I am going to train for 4,760 steps in total. Now let's continue. This is very important. You need to give a name to the model you are going to train. So how do you want to name the model? In my case, it's going to be something like Felipe 170 steps per image. Something like that. And once everything is ready, you are going to click on train. You are going to wait a few seconds. And that's going to be pretty much all. And then you are going to see a message like this, which says, "Thank you, the training process has started, please come back later." And if we go back to the pod instance in where we are running this process, you can see that we were sleeping for a very long time until we started this training process, and then we have just started this training process, right? Remember that we have an SQS query, and we are just pulling data from the query continuously, and once we have received a new message, which is the message we have sent once we clicked on train, then it starts the training process, right? So now everything is ready, everything is just being trained, and now I'm going to post the video here and I'm going to resume it once this training is completed. Okay, now let's see what happened. Let's take a look at the results. If I go to select model, now you are going to see we have this new model we have just trained, Felipe 170 steps per image. If I select this model and then I go to select style, you can see we have a very long list of many different styles we can choose from. So let me select one of them. I'm going to select biking and I'm going to click on generate, and these are all the pictures we have generated for this style. We are going to generate exactly 8 pictures for every single style, and this is how I will look like as a Viking. So now let me show you another style. I'm going to select Paladin and I'm going to click on generate, and this is how I will look like as a Paladin. Please notice that in my case the full bodies are not working very properly. The results for the full body images are not very good, but if I look at the close-ups, this is how I will look like as a Paladin. Now let's continue. I'm going to choose another style. I'm going to go for Hobbit, and this is how I will look like as a Hobbit. Now I'm going to choose Harry Potter. This is how I will look like as Harry Potter. Then Elf. Click on generate, and this is how I will look like as an elf. I think these are very realistic pictures. This is maybe one of my favorite styles. Then let's continue. If I select soccer and I click on generate, in this case we have many full bodies, so it's not working very properly, but this is how I will look like as a soccer player. Now let's continue. Clown, and this is also one of my favorite styles. You can see that these pictures are just amazing. These are very colorful pictures, and this is maybe one of my favorite styles. Now let's continue. If I click on Jedi, this is how I will look like as a Jedi. And if I continue, we also have Wizard, we have Cyberpunk, we have Astronaut, and we have many more styles. Now let me show you where these styles come from, right? If I go to the GitHub repository, you can see we have a file which is called prompts.py, and if I open this file, you can see that we have a dictionary which is called default prompts, and this is where I have defined all of these prompts, right? Viking, Paladin, Hobbit, and so on. And this is a list of prompts which I have copied from here, photoshop.app/prompts. So these are the prompts we are using, and now let me show you something else. If I go to custom prompt, you can just write the prompt you want to use in order to generate images. Let me show you how it works. I'm going to write something like a photo of me. This is how you need to write it, at me. And let's say something like, I don't know, holding a cat, right? This is just an example, and once you have your prompt, you are going to click on generate, and you are going to see a message saying image generation has started, please come back later. And after a few minutes, once this image generation is completed, you are going to click this button over here, which is going to refresh the application. It's going to start the application again, and it's going to download the new images from the S3 bucket, and it's just going to add the new style here, right? Now let me show you. If I go to select model, I'm going to select the model we trained, and if I go to select style, you can see that at the bottom we have a new style, we have a new prompt, which is the custom prompt we have just generated. And if I click on generate, these are the pictures of me holding a cat, right? You can see that the full body is not working very well, but the other pictures are okay. Some pictures are okay. So this is basically an example of how you can create your custom prompt and you can generate your custom images. Now let me give you some recommendations of what you can do if the model you trained is not performing very well. I am going to the GitHub repository we are using as a base, right? The Dreambooth implementation we are using in order to train our models. And if I scroll down at the bottom, the authors of this GitHub repository have made some recommendations of what to do if the model is not working well. And you can see we have three different options: if the images are not looking like you at all, if the images are looking like you but they are looking like your training images, or if they are looking like you but not when you are trying different styles. So if you have any issue when you are training your model, please get back here, and these are some recommendations of some things you may do in order to improve your results. And that's going to be pretty much all. Now let me show you something else, which is the next steps in this project. I had so much fun when working with this project, and these are some next steps in order to make it even better. So we could make it into a web application, because currently we are using a Python application which is running locally, but it will be very fun and it will be a very cool project to make it a web application. Then it will be very interesting, it will be a very good improvement if we could make the model training and the inference in a serverless service, because currently, remember, we are using RunPod, so we have a server which is running continuously 24/7. It will be much better to make it a serverless service. Then it will be very good to explore other technologies for face generation and person generation, because you know how it is, this field evolves super quickly, so it's a very good idea we take a look at other technologies, we take a look at what are the most recent technologies, so we get the most powerful results. So this is going to be all for today. My name is Felipe. In this channel I make coding tutorials around computer vision and machine learning. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to click the like button, and I also invite you to subscribe to my channel. This is going to be all for today, and see you on my next video.